Thank you everyone for coming today. This is the first event, ECON-CEP UG Virtual Research Showcase. I'm Young Lim. I'm a faculty in Econ department and also UG coordinator of the department. So that's why I'm here to lead the event. So before we start, let me give you some briefing of the event details. So this is the rundown of the event. We're gonna have soon an opening remark by Professor David Cook. And after that, we have 3 presentations. As announced already, we have 15-minute presentation for each team and extra 5-minute Q&A. 15-minute time constraint will be strict, so I will stop the presenters after 15 minutes. So if you have any questions, please try not to stop the presentation, but wait until we have Q&A time, 5 minutes. After 3 presentations, we're gonna have very short 5-minute breaks and restart our next 3 presentations at 4:10. And after all 6 presentations are done, we'll have 5 minutes for the voting for the winners. I'm gonna give you more details about how we vote later. And then we're gonna have award giving ceremony. Conclusion will be made by the remark by Professor Sujata Visaria, who is the director of the CEP. We have the following 6 teams to present today, right? And this is the order of the presentation, okay? Selection of the winners. Each participating faculty has 1 vote via the polling function in the Zoom. So soon you're gonna get the link. And then using that, you can just vote 1, and that will be quick and simple. If you are the faculty members who supervise a team, then you should not vote for your own team, okay? We'll make sure that the average is calculated correctly, all right? And the person or the team having the largest votes and the second largest vote will win each award. We have only 2 awards today. One is the winner, the other one is the first one runner-up. And tie-breaking will be reserved in an inclusive manner. That means if 2 teams are at the tie, then both of them will be the first winner. Okay, we have 1 winner and then 2 other teams or people having the same vote, then these 2 people, both of them, will be the first runner-up. Okay. That's the tie-breaking rule. Let me see if you have any questions. All right, very good. Then let me invite Professor David Cook to say a few words about this event. Dave?
Okay, so I have just a few words. I'd like to thank Young, Professor Lim, for spearheading this event and the UG committee for organizing such an outstanding group of students to present their research. And I'd also like to thank Professor Sujata Visaria and the other heads of the Center for Economic Policy for hosting this event. The Center of Economic Policy is an umbrella for the econ faculty to do their policy relevant research and heighten the impact that might have on society. And so I'm glad to see that it's also acting as an umbrella for our students to bring some policy relevant research to our local community. So one of the things that's exciting to me about this is that the students here have internalized the idea that a university is not just a place for transferring knowledge, it's a place for creating knowledge. And all of the research here appears to have created knowledge that will be not only impressive to us as faculty members, but will be hopefully informative as well to the students and to their fellow students. And so it can be regrettable sometimes that students may view the university experience as being that of consumers, of hearing about ideas that have been created by other people. but I think I admire your ambition in taking part in that knowledge creation that is central to the spirit of the university. Okay, so I'll just sit back and listen and return to Wu Yang.
All right, thank you very much, Dave. Let me make sure that we are recording this event. Is recording done? Cassie?
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much. All right, without any further ado, let me invite our first speaker. Okay, FANG Yuhan. Yuhan is our ECON student, BBA Econ, who started his research through his course, Econometrics 4284. Okay, this is an elective course, Econometrics for cross-section and panel data. And supervisor is Junlong Fang. So Yuhan shared with us his thought about research. He said, this research experience allowed me to take one step further to prove something uncertain. And I enjoyed the feeling of risk and excitement. All right, so Yuhan, please share your screen. Yuhan is presenting consistency of the non-parametric MTE estimation using Causal forest. It's not the forecast. Okay, Yuhan, please share your screen.
Could you see it?
Yes.
Okay. Then I'll start. Good afternoon. My name is FANG Yuhan. Today, I'd like to share with you my research on the consistency of the non-parametric MT estimation in the Kosovo forest. Before we start, I want to first thank Dr. Feng for his instruction in my research. Thank you very much. And in this research, we developed a non-parametric causal forest approach for the MT estimation, and we theoretically showed its consistency and reliability. This approach can effectively overcome the curse of dimensionality as the covariates increase, and it is applicable in evaluating the causal effects in the empirical research. Normally, when we evaluate a program with a binary treatment, we would generate the causal indicators like the average treatment effect or the conditional average treatment effect for further analysis. However, individual responses would be heterogeneously variant, which led to the late revolution in the 1990s when the local average treatment effect was first introduced. As we can see, the late refers to the situation where the individuals shift into or out of the treatment when the instrument moves from Z to Z dash. To be more accurate, researchers then introduced the MTE to find the marginal treatment effect when the instrument is at Z exactly. It is like the relationship of the integration and derivatives, and actually we can mathematically get the late by integrating MTE within the small bandwidth. Obviously, the marginal treatment effect would be more informative and more valuable, and it is widely applied in various literatures like analysis on the junior education, the policy intervention, the disability insurance on labor supply, etc. So it is useful. And here we provide definitions from the Heckman and Wittler on the MTE. The marginal treatment effect is the gain from the treatment for individuals shifted into or out of the treatment by a marginal change in the predicted probability of the treatment. They also gave the classical parametric and the semi-parametric approach on the MTE as shown in the slide. These approaches estimate the propensity score through special distributions like the normal distribution, for example, but there is limited research on non-parametric MT approach. And moreover, the classical non-parametric approach for the causal effect is nearest neighbor matching, kernel methods, and series estimation, all of which would quickly break down as the number of covariates increases. So, to develop a more reliable non-parametric marginal treatment effect approach and to avoid the curse of dimensionality, we turn to the idea of causal forest algorithm from Stephen Wager and Sneha. The causal forest is composed of many binary causal trees, which were planted in a data-driven way to determine different treatment weights of splitting. It can be used in environments with many covariates or complex interactions among the covariates, and hence avoids the curse of dimensionality when estimating the marginal treatment effect in our research as well. Now, with a basic understanding of the marginal treatment effect and the causal forest, we could start our modeling. We designed our framework based on the generalized Royal model with a potential outcome model and a latent variable discrete choice model for treatment status. We considered two potential outcomes, Y1i and Y0i, a binary treatment DI, a vector of pre-treatment covariance xi, and the unobserved error term U0i and U1i. Also, considering the endogeneity, we introduced the instrument Zi and the net gain from the treatment, which we denoted as the ID. From the latent variable model, we took cumulative distribution of the ID and we generated the propensity score PZI. With that, we identified the marginal treatment effect as the following. The MTE can be expressed as the derivative of the conditional expectation of the YI on the propensity score at the value of U, the marginal value of individuals shifting into or out of the treatment. Now, all prepared, our non-parametric approach started from generating the propensity scores using the causal forest. Since the DI is a binary treatment, the propensity score can also be written as the expectation of the treated ones conditional on the instrument. According to Stephen Wager and Sneha, the causal forest can show the causal effect of different covariates, like the conditional expectations of potential outcome Y on this covariates, say x1, x2 to xp, for example. And hence, here we would also take the propensity score as the causal effect of the instrument Zi on the treatment outcome Di, and use the causal forest to get the unbiased, consistent, and asymptotic normal propensity score PZ hat. And in the step 2, under the certain smooth assumptions on the treatment effects, like the expectation is third-order continuous differentiable C estimator, say the global polynomial, then the conditional expectation is uniformly consistent. And moreover, as the derivative of the polynomial is still a polynomial, when we compute the marginal treatment effect without the loss of generality, we can automatically transform the non-parametric identification into an unspecified polynomial function, and we denote it as the f of pzi for simplicity. With the p hat, we have f hat of p hat, and we want to show that the f hat of p hat is equal to f of p in probability. With the absolute inequality and some simple mathematical transformations, we have the soup expression as shown in the slide, and we want to show two things. First, the soup of the absolute value of f hat of p hat minus f of p hat is equal to 0 in probability. And the second thing, the soup of the absolute value of f of p hat minus f of p is equal to 0 in probability as well. For the first one, as the PZ is within the range of 0 and 1, we can always find a P star that belongs to the interval of 0 and 1, such that the Superman expression reaches this maximum as well. Now, the only unknown part is the unspecified non-parametric function f. And according to the CEP estimation, the polynomial f hat is consistent, and thus the Superman is uniformly consistent with a large sample size. So the first part got proved. And for the second one, according to the mean value theorem, we have the sup of the f difference equal to the sup of the f dash of some specific p tilde times the difference of pz. F dash is the second order derivative of the conditional expectation of y on x and pz, and it is smaller than the infinity based on the theorems of sieve extremum estimation. As the causal forest provides the consistent propensity scores, we can also get consistent sup value here in the second step. Then we combined our analysis and ultimately we confirmed the entire consistency of the non-parametric approach. And to conclude, this research focused on non-parametric MTE modeling on causal forest with a reliable consistency. And to confirm consistency, we made two assumptions. First, we assumed that our dataset satisfied the basic assumptions of the generalized Royal model and the causal forest. For instance, we assumed that the error terms in the Royal model are not independent, even conditioning on the observables. We also assumed that the causal forest is honest, etc. And apart from these existing ones, we made another assumption on the conditional expectation of y on the covariates and the propensity score. We smoothed the expectation into a third order continuous differentiable sieve estimator to make sure that the expectation is uniformly consistent, which would be helpful when we did the Superman test later. With such simple assumptions, we are able to generate the propensity scores with the causal forest and consistently identify the non-parametric MTE based on the generalized Royal model. This approach has two advantages. The first, we do not need to presume the distribution of propensity score as in the case of parametric or semi-parametric approach. So this estimation would be more natural and more credible. And the second, we explored the use of ideas from the machine learning literature to improve the performance of these classical methods with many covariates and overcome the curse of dimensionality using the causal forest. Besides, there still exists some limitations in the research. First, for completeness, we shall further test if the causal forest here in the MT estimation is also unbiased and asymptotically normal. And we may practically test the credibility through empirical data as well. Even with those, this research provides an innovative perspective in the non-parametric MT estimation as we attempted to incorporate the machine learning algorithms. And we believe that more and more advanced techniques will be useful in contemporary economic research. Thank you for your listening and welcome for your questions.
Thank you very much, Yuhan. So let's invite questions from the floor, students and faculties. Any question? We actually have about 7 minutes for the Q&A discussion. Any questions?
So do you think this method is computationally feasible even when we have many, like hundreds dimensions of covariates?
I think it is also applicable as the original causal forest model by the Stephen Wagner and Susan Nathi. The original model can be used in hundreds of covariate cases, so it is also applicable here. Yeah.
I see. Thank you.
Thank you.
My question is, I know you may not think about how you test your theoretical version using some empirical data, but do you have any setup in mind? If you have some data and then see the validity of your method, what kind of data will you use and in what environment?
Thank you for your question. Do you mean, is there any data in my mind?
No, I mean, what will be the ideal data set to test your theory?
Actually, in the paper, I mentioned the Monte Carlo simulation. It would be an ideal way to test its validity, but in the presentation, I mean, empirical data, it will be like we can use this method to test some real question. And as the Marshall treatment effect has a wide application in like policy intervention or education analysis. So I think this method could also be used in those environments. Yeah.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Following on Yuh's question, I guess if the main contribution of this paper is to avoid the curse of dimensionality, can you mention some paper in which there's a clear curse of dimensionality that you can say, here it is the best application?
Thank you for your question. I learned about the definition from the econ course, and I think it would be an essential problem as the data set become larger and has many features to identify. So, but I may not be able to figure out some specific paper that talking about the curse of dimensionality.
Well, so I was thinking, for example, like if you think about Amazon data sets or data sets with many products or many observations, right? This may be one application. At the end of the day, curse of dimensionality depends on like sample size versus like number of observations, right? Mm-hmm. So I don't know. Yeah, I was just wondering.
I am still. Could you please repeat your question? I'm sorry.
Yeah. So I was just wondering if there's a specific example of an experiment in which they have like a lot of like variables, right? So that they are running into this like curse of dimensionality, right? And that in some papers they even say like, look, maybe we have too much variables, or you know, like, or you may think that they are running into this curse of dimensionality. So if your contribution is that you are avoiding the curse, which are kind of the papers that you can replicate and say we are able to do what they are doing but better, type of thing. It's fine if you don't. Yeah, maybe we can go to the next question.
Okay, thank you.
My another question is, I mean, I'm not an econometrician at all, and then I have taken some econometrics course more than 10 years ago. So I don't know whether my question is relevant, but I haven't seen, you know, any estimate that actually strictly, you know, outperforming the existing ones. Many times there are trade-offs. So you show your new estimate has a benefit in terms of consistency, and then you already said you need to check, you know, other properties. But what is your gut? What is your feeling? Like, do you think that your estimate will also have the, you know, advantage relative to other existing estimate regarding what do you have here? Asymptotic normality and so on and so forth. Do you have any idea of how it goes in other dimensions?
I did not prove it very strictly, but I think I think it would be applicable as following my proof. You could see that we used the causal forest, which is consistent, unbiased, and asymptotic normal. and the later steps, I don't think there would be any reason that may cause the result to be biased or not asymptotic normal. So I feel like it would be apply the rule, but it would need further tests. Yeah.
So your gut feeling or your intuition is that your new estimate is superior in most of the important dimensions relative to existing ones. Is that what you claim? That would be actually very good. I mean, if that is the case, that would be fantastic.
It would be not so, because I didn't prove it strictly, so I feel like it would be useful, but I don't know for sure.
Okay.
That would be one of the limitations here.
Thank you very much. Any other question? We still have 1 minute. Yuhan, then let me ask you to share very briefly about, what you have experienced and feel during your research.
Oh my God.
Do you have anything to share with other people?
As I mentioned in the passage I sent by email, this is my first time doing the theoretical research. I spent quite a hard time starting the work and getting to the final answer. It is quite difficult for me for right now, but as I complete the full essay, I feel like it is really exciting, and that'll be the whole thing I want to share. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Why don't we give her a big hands, right? Thank you.
Thank you.
And let's invite our second team, Sujata.
Sure, thank you. So the second presentation is going to be by Albus Tang. Albus, can you share your screen, please?
Yes.
And then I'll introduce you. So I happen to know Alvis quite well. What he's presenting today is work he did with Bryant. I think Bryant is in this meeting as well. And so I'm just going to tell you a few things that he sent in when we asked him for his thoughts about this project. So he started working on this during the course that he took with Bryant called Health and Education Economics, because Bryant asked them all to write research proposals for the class. And so he wrote a research proposal for that class, and then he went a step beyond and decided to implement his research proposal as well. What I found interesting about what he wrote about his experience is, one, that he learned that research tends to be an iterative process. So he says you do a lot of thinking, coding, and then redoing. So I think that's an important lesson. And the other thing I thought was very interesting is that he has drawn on discussions with people from different disciplines even. So he said the methodology arose from discussions with Professor Francisca Barbara Keller in social science, who is a political scientist with whom I was taking a social network analysis class. And then he has, of course, had discussions both with Bryant and also occasionally with me. And his tip for students who are interested in learning to do research or wanting to do research, his two tips are to read more and to actively reach out to faculty members. So that is Alvis's secret of success. And now he's going to tell us about conditional cash transfers in Malawi.
Thank you, Sujata, for the kind introduction. Hi, everyone. So today I'm Albus Tang, and today I'll be presenting my paper supervised by Professor Brand Kim. So to start, I would like to give you some context on education conditional cash transfers. So education for girls have been widely regarded as transformative in many developing countries. And there are different ways for different governments to attempt to raise girls' education enrollment. A popular one is providing conditional cash transfers linked to attendance. So if the student attends class, then she would receive a certain amount in cash. Such transfers are often targeted, meaning that they're not available to all. As they're targeted, this creates haves and have-nots, which could be potentially salient to beneficiaries if they interact regularly. And potentially this could lead to unintended consequences, which is what my paper is mainly about. So the paper is loosely related to two pieces of literature. As limited by today's time constraint, I don't really have the time to walk you through, but then it's on the spillovers on conditional cash transfers, and also some literature on networks in education interventions and in interventions in general. So here's the empirical context of the paper. So in Malawi, students receives 8 years of free primary education, 4 years of paid secondary education, and 4 years of university level education. The education conditional cash transfer focuses on the second stage. So students at grades 9 and grade 10 are eligible for the cash transfer. As in many African countries, gender disparities is prevalent. At the time of the intervention, boys are far more likely to enroll in the secondary education and to complete their secondary education. So the intervention was a education support, conditional cash transfer, provided to grade 9 and grade 10 female students from 33 public schools in Lilongwe, the capital city of Malawi, by the Africa Future Foundation, which is an NGO there. All of the public schools were reached out for this program, and students were given an amount equivalent to a year's worth of school fees and also a monthly stipend through the school year. The support was provided across years, provided from the first semester to the second semester of the next year. So here's the randomization design. So after the baseline survey, students were randomized to either the treatment group or the control group. Randomization was conducted on the classroom level and stratified by grade. The first evaluation was on this program was actually already conducted by Professor Kim and in Kim et al., where he evaluated the direct effect of this program on education outcomes and levels of economic rationality. As my paper focuses mainly on education outcomes, I'll just talk about this part. So basically, in Kim et al., the authors found that the program was effective in reducing student absence, in reducing student dropout, and students were more likely to pass the exams. And one interesting point, which will come into play later, is that there were larger effects found in the 9th graders than in the 10th graders. And the authors argue that that was because 9th graders typically had larger dropout rates. So before I walk into my paper, I would like to illustrate by a graph that hopefully illustrates the point better. So here we have a school. A school has different classrooms. You have your female and male students, and you have your arrows indicating their friendship networks. So in this case, all students have friendship networks restricted within the classroom borders. This is the world described in Kim et al., where the authors were only considering the direct effects of students of the intervention. However, that need not be the case. As we can see here, in this case, the focal student here on the right, she has a friend who is outside of her classroom but under the same school. Then it's not entirely clear from Kim et al. Whether or not the treatment effects are different in the first case and in the second case for this particular focal student. So my research question is basically whether or not the treatment effect varies with my own treatment status, whether or not I'm in a treated classroom or a control classroom, and who I am friends with at baseline. So in the paper, I argued that randomization on the class level introduced exogenous variation on the treatment status of one's close friend at baseline. Conditional, that the close friend is in a different baseline class than the focal student. And I call this treatment status of my close friend the close friend treatment in the paper. I'll refer to it as a close friend treatment in my presentation as well. Interestingly, at the baseline and at the first follow-up, students were asked to name the 3 best friends in school using a survey question similar to what you see on the right, and which allowed me to examine whether or not actually the treatment affected the friendship networks of these students. To make the identification strategy cleaner, I restricted the network to female close friends, as male friends would not be eligible for the cash transfer program altogether. Of course, when one is trying to make a claim that this close friend treatment is indeed exogenous, one needs to check whether or not that is the case. And here are to do that, I conducted a difference of means test and also a selective attrition test. So here's the balance check of the close friend treatment. So as you can see, there are some differences between the pooled sample, the overall sample, the baseline 9th graders and baseline 10th graders. But then to the extent where 5 out of 36 statistical tests, only 5 out of 36 were statistically significant, we have relative reassurance that this close friend treatment might have been exogenous. For attrition, there's no there's no evidence of any differential attrition, which gives us relative reassurance. So the first research question is a question directly linked to Kim et al., whether or not the close friend treatment, whether or not there exists education spillovers on the school level. So here I ran a OLS estimate. You can see your outcome variable here, your CCT treatment, the direct treatment, my friend's treatment, and an interaction chart. I also controlled for the individual level controls and grade level fixed effects if necessary. I also include an alternate specification, which you will see in the regression tables that come for a control of whether or not the focal student has any close friend outside of her class at school at baseline. All of the standard errors are clustered on classroom level, as in common standards. The outcome variables are, again, the same ones as Kim et al. So we have self-reported absence, dropout, taking the public exam, passing it, total education, and standardized treatment effect. So here are the main regression tables. Let me walk you through one by one. Wait a second. Okay, so here we can find that even when we're controlling for my friend's treatment effect, that the positive direct effects of the conditional cash transfers as identified in Kim et al. Remain. So the conditional cash transfer lowers absence, it increases the likelihood of taking the JCE and passing it, and also there is a positive and sizable, somewhat sizable standardized treatment effect. There also seems to be some positive spillovers on student attendance in the control group. That is, here in the second row, you can see that the coefficient on my friend's treatment term is negative and significant. However, interestingly, such spillovers were not present if the focal student was in the treatment group, as we can see at the F test here. So here I showed we run the same regression, but then using a different sample. So here instead of the pooled sample, we're using the grade 9 sample. Again, we find positive direct effects on education outcomes, as identified in Kim et al. Remain. We find that my friend's treatment has positive spillovers in my attendance, and that such spillovers are not present in the treatment group. For grade 10, the picture is a bit more nuanced. As mentioned earlier, that in Kim et al., the effects were smaller at grade 10. So what we find here is that the treatment had positive direct effects on education outcomes. However, the friend's treatment, there were negative spillovers on passing the JC in the control group, even when controlling for whether or not the student has a friend outside of the class at baseline. So let me walk you through what the main results are from the first question. For the CCT, the direct effects remain strong. There seems to be some positive spillovers on self-reported absence on grade 9 students. And there seems to be some negative spillovers on passing the JCE on grade 10 control students. The second research question is on the changes of friendship networks. So whether or not the intervention actually changed the friendship networks from baseline to first follow-up. Again, I run a simple OLS regression. We have the same specification basically. You have your CCT term here, you have your friends treatment and the interaction term. For the outcome variables, I chose different outcome variables. I chose the number of friends, the change in the number of friends outside of one's baseline class, and the change in the number of treated friends outside of one's baseline class. So one point to note here is that the results should be interpreted as a difference of friendship networks of a specific individual from baseline to first follow-up instead of an average individual. So we're basically controlling for individual effects. So here are the results for the full sample. We can see, we can walk you through one line by one row. So the conditional cash transfer lowers the number of best free friends by a slight amount, but then doesn't seem to affect the number of treated students as best free friends. The close friend treatment doesn't affect the number of best free friends. Originally, it was statistically significant, but then upon controlling for whether or not the student has a friend outside of class at baseline, the coefficient is rendered insignificant. One point to note, which is consistent in the full sample, grade 9 sample and grade 10 sample, is that the close friend treatment lowers the number of treated friends outside of one's class. So in other words, it increases the likelihood of naming a control student as one's best free friend. And such an effect from the F-test, we can show that such an effect is found for focal students, both in treated and control classrooms. You can also see in grade 9 samples that there are negative and significant coefficients here. Such a coefficient is sizable and practically significant considering the fact that a student could only name best free friends at most. But then we're seeing a coefficient of close to -1. Again, we have similar results for grade 10 as well. So a point to note on, so how can we make sense of our results here? So we have on one side, treated students are more likely to be close friends with fellow treated students for one particular sample, and that untreated students are more likely to be close friends with fellow untreated students across all of the samples. In combining these two facts, there's some evidence of formation of cliques along treatment lines. And this could be potentially a causal channel driving the original results from Kim et al. One might be thinking, maybe it's the interaction of students from treatment and control classrooms, and considering the case that the fact that the CCT program was provided across academic years, students could have changed classrooms, and maybe that's the interaction between students and between treatment and control classrooms that contribute to such results. However, when I controlled for whether or not the focal student changed class from baseline to first follow-up, the coefficient on the close friend treatment remains negative and significant and of a similar magnitude. Just to conclude, what do we learn from this little bit of research? I found some evidence of spillovers of education cash transfers along friendship networks. This is consistent with literature that downstream outcomes are more difficult to improve, that while there seems to be some spillovers, it's more linked to outcomes that are directly linked to the condition of the conditional cash transfer, in this case attendance itself. There's also some evidence that friendship networks were distorted by the education cash transfer, particularly with some clique formations along treatment assignment lines. And in practice, policymakers might need to be considering distortion to networks when designing policy. And that's the end of my presentation, and I open the floor for questions.
Thank you very much. Exactly 15 minutes. So we have 5 minutes for the Q&A. Any questions?
Can you give some interpretation for some of the main results? For example, for grade 9 students, you found that the treatment on the close friend will decreases the absence, but in grade 10, it doesn't. What kind of interpretation can you draw from these findings?
Right, so I think the results are not that surprising, considering the fact that even in Kim et al. Itself, if we're just considering the first and in Kim et al., the conditional cash transfer, the positive outcomes brought about were a lot more significant for the grade 9 sample than were in the case of the grade 10 sample. I was thinking about this yesterday, actually, whether or not, you know, how the changes in friendship networks come into play. I think for grade 9, there seems to be a better story that control students tend to be friends with fellow control students because of this, like, affected by this intervention, and that might have segregated, if you may, the treatment group and the control group, and maybe that's driving some of the results that we see here. But then for grade 10, it's not entirely clear how the results are how the results came about, as you know, we still find a similar distortion in the networks, but then the education results seem to be different. My way of interpreting this is that it's a lot more difficult to raise downstream outcomes, as you know, examination isn't a condition directly linked to whether or not the student has is eligible for the conditional cash transfer itself. So
Okay.
yeah, that's my.
I would like to ask, so here each student needs to say, like, who is their best friend. They can only name 3 people, right?
Yes.
So have you tried, like, different specifications, for example, like whether both of them say that they are on the best friend list, or whether one says it's best friend but the other not, right?
Right.
Are there any differences on computing that? The other question is, like, now you are seeing the effects of the best friend, right?
Yes.
But what about the best friend of my best friend, right? So how long along the chain does these spillovers go? Do you have any idea, or have you tried?
Right. Thanks for the question. For the first part, reciprocity, I haven't I haven't conducted the robustness checks of reciprocity yet, and so that's definitely one step that I will walk into. For the second question, regarding whether or not one's friend's friend affects oneself, I think it's a question that I haven't tested myself yet. But then to the extent that one's mostly affected by your own best friends, I think the second degree effects will be less significant. That's my gut feeling, but of course I will need to check for that. Yes.
Thank you.
So,
Alvis, Mike, Sujata, please go ahead.
sorry. So my understanding somehow was that you didn't know friends of friends, and you only knew everybody's own 3 best friends. But I guess you can connect people through the data. Yeah. I was wondering what would happen if you included male friends as well. You said you dropped them, but if they are grade 9 and they are teenagers, then I imagine that that's a time where, you know, same-sex friendship versus opposite-sex friendships can begin. I mean, I have a teenager myself, so I'm speaking from experience, can matter. So I wonder if you have anything to say about that, or if there's any way to check.
Right. So regarding the male friends, that's actually one point that I've thought about as well, that, you know, if we, you know, the male friends were not eligible, and whether or not this treatment actually affects the male's friends. But then I think the approach is limited by a number of an issue, which is at the time of the intervention, I think that I might be slightly wrong, but maybe Professor Kim can correct me if I'm wrong. But then at the male students were actually eligible for a separate intervention, so which was also conducted on the classroom level. So at the same time, so using my identification strategy, I thought it was going to be cleaner just to drop the males altogether, just not to mix.
Okay.
Mix
Thanks. Yeah, I understand.
All right, thank you, Alvis. Due to the time limit, I need to stop you here. Why don't we give him a big hands again? Thank you. Okay, so let me invite our third presentation group Sneha, PURI, Yuang, Alvis again, and then Xiaolong and Yebin. Let me briefly introduce these 4 students. They have conducted this research based on their UROP, and also some of them have done this through their CEP internship as well. All right. So Sneha is our econ student, Alvis is from ECOF, Xiaolong is from ECOF, and Yebin is from econ. So this group is very diversified in terms of, nationality, gender, programs as well. All right. So from their sharing, I found something quite interesting. They said they recommend all our undergrad students to opt for UROP, as it is an eye-opening journey. Excellent. And they said that will help them understand all the work behind conducting compelling research. The most important thing is to always be organized and keep asking questions to your supervisors whenever unsure. By the way, their supervisor is Sujata. All right, without further ado, let's invite the people. Please start if you are ready. Thank you.
Hi everyone. Hi everyone again. I'm Albus Tang and my teammates are Sneha, Ayla, and Binny. And yeah, we've been Europe students under Professor Sujata Visaria, and we're delighted to present an overview of our fieldwork on the financial behaviors, choices, and management of Filipino domestic workers in Hong Kong. So let me start by giving you some background on Filipino domestic workers. Sneha, please. Okay, so Hong Kong is home to close to 190,000 Filipino domestic workers. All of them have a standardized contracts by law, and this means that they have stable wages and predictable incomes, and that they can plan their futures ahead. As there exists no pathway to citizenship, they will all return to the Philippines eventually. So, one might be interacting with Filipino domestic workers here and there, and you might be wondering to yourself, okay, so how well are they actually doing? It might be obvious that, the average Filipino domestic worker should be doing better. Otherwise, they wouldn't come to Hong Kong in the first place by reviewed preference. Also, one might think that, the wages in Hong Kong are multiples of what they could have earned in the Philippines, and so they should be performing better. However, from our calculations using the NMS, the National Migration Survey, which is this nationally representative survey of returned migrants from the Philippines, we find that close to 2/3 of returned Filipino domestic workers actually report no improvement in their living standards after working in Hong Kong. Then the interesting question arises: why is failed migration prevalent among Filipino domestic workers? So this has bugged, I guess, years of Europe teams, and previous teams have investigated the issue, trying to investigating the issue of borrowing behavior of Filipino domestic workers, conducting experiments, surveying them. And however, in our round of fieldwork, we were interested in understanding 2 separate questions. The first one is, how can we improve the migration outcomes of Filipino domestic workers? How can we actually help them achieve their migration goals, whatever these goals may be? And the second one is, how does the individual situation and family affect the individual's likelihood of achieving their migration goals? So as you can see, lots of these questions are highly linked to goals. And so I'll pass the time to Binny, who will walk us through a bit of the existing literature on goals.
Thanks, Alvis. In this section, I would like to review some important literature for our research. First, in order to provide a solution, we need to identify the root cause of the problem. So why are people unable to save? Our first hypothesis is that people do not know how to save. They lack financial literacy. And then our second hypothesis is that people face behavioral barriers. So some people might be psychologically constrained. They lack the motivation or confidence in their abilities to achieve the goals. Or on the other hand, some people might just struggle to implement their goals into their actions, possibly because of procrastination, forgetfulness, or impulsive consumption. For the first hypothesis, we found that the effect of conventional financial training is actually quite minimal, which means the lack of financial literacy is most likely not the main cause of this inability to saving problem. Also, McKinsey et al. Argue that it is very important to carefully conduct financial intervention because when a goal is set extremely high and then eventually unmet, there could be a detrimental effect on the participants' future borrowing, investing, and general sense of control over their finances, as well as their lives. Regarding the second hypothesis, Dalton et al. Argue that the poor indeed have a tendency to fail to aspire, meaning they have a lower level of confidence in their abilities to achieve goals. However, they point out that this is actually a result of poverty rather than a cause of it. The World Bank also conducted a randomized control trial using monetary incentive to look at the effect of motivation on savings behaviors. And then they found out that the effect of motivation is actually quite insignificant and generally not strong enough for individuals to overcome the behavioral barriers. So the major takeaway from our literature review is that savings behaviors are highly complex. A lot of people know how to save, but they just have trouble implementing their thoughts and goals into their actions. Therefore, just telling our participants to dream bigger or they're not doing this enough are most likely not going to help. Therefore, we believe that a longitudinal one-on-one interview research method that contains both qualitative and quantitative aspects of data will be very, very helpful for us to optimize financial intervention program, catering for different people's financial situations and their personal characteristics. Now, I'll pass my time to Sneha to discuss our research method.
Thanks, Minnie. I will now be talking about our research method that we used to gather more information about our research questions. Our research method included 2 individual interviews with each OFW, 1 qualitative and 1 quantitative. Through these interviews, we aim to gain information about their migration history, their migration goals, financial behavior, and financial management. In our research team, for the interview days, we had 2 principal investigators, 6 Tagalog speakers, 3 for each type of interview, and 5 admin staff. I will now go into more detail about each of these interviews and the data collected therein. For the qualitative interview, each participant underwent a 1.5-hour interview, which was open-ended but followed a rough structure based on pre-decided themes. There were 2 interviewers, 1 Tagalog speaker and 1 principal investigator. Another Tagalog speaker, who would be the interviewer for the quantitative interview, which would be done subsequently, observed this interview to get some background about the OFW. If the participant gave her consent, us undergraduate students were also allowed to be in the Zoom room during the interview as observers. This was a great learning opportunity, which not only helped us understand how to facilitate qualitative research, but also to get a deeper insight into the lives of our participants. The main topics covered in this were the OFW's migration history, goals for migration and their progress, family support and communication, and significant life events. English, Tagalog, or a mix of both languages were used in this interview. Here are some sample points for the qualitative interview guide with which the interviewers used. In the quantitative interview, all participants were interviewed for about 2 hours using a questionnaire on Qualtrics. The questions would include more information about their family, salary, expenditures, remittances, etc., and details about the impact of COVID-19 on their lives. The interview also contains some generally accepted and verified scales to gain a better understanding about their mental health. And this was administered completely in Tagalog. So now, Vinny will give more information about the quality control measures for our survey.
So quality control is extremely crucial to minimize human errors as well as ensuring the accuracy and consistency of quantitative data. So our protocol is that the quantitative interviewers revisit the data set to go over the responses again. So things they look out for is number 1, are the values in the correct currency? Is it in HKD or the Philippine pesos? Number 2, they also compare and cross-check different types of responses. For example, they go through both qualitative and quantitative responses to review the participants' employment history, outstanding loan value, financial goals, and their progresses, and etc. And then, most importantly, they look out for a lot of contradictions of logic between different responses. So for instance, the outstanding loan value and repaid amount should add up to principal, and remittance amount should be larger than remittance spending, etc. And then as a final step, we also have our admin team that has less prior knowledge of the responses go over the data and the error list again. And now I'll pass time to Ayla to discuss our findings of the project.
Thanks, Vinny. We met 3 main challenges in this semester. They are pandemic, our results, and availability of our participants. Accordingly, we set a series of solutions to solve them. We conducted online interviews and held group meetings constantly to cope with the pandemic. We conducted rounds of quality controls to correct the errors, and we scheduled the meetings on Sunday and collected the availability of our participants, and then we will provide more time slots for the future interviews and the workshops. Next, I'd like to share about our findings. Before we talk about the results, please let me share 2 special cases of our participants. Please note that all names here are not the real name to protect their privacy. Case 1, Madeline. Madeline is 33 years old. She has 2 children and her husband loves her very much. She had 6,000 Hong Kong dollars income in typical months. However, now she feels nervous because of the pandemic. She is trapped in her hometown and she has no salary to settle her debts in Hong Kong. Please refer to the left side. You can find that all her motivation is relatively vague. And she told us in the interview that I have young children. My husband doesn't have a regular work. We live with parents. I have a dream. I have a dream to my family, to have a better future and to our own house. Case 2 is Grace. Grace is 45 years old and she has 2 children. She has 4,830 Hong Kong dollars income in typical months. Her husband typically covers all the main expenses at home, so most of her salary is used beyond the daily necessities. She has clear motivations and she is interested in strategies and ideas on how to achieve goals, so she learns them online by herself. Next, I'd like to share about our results. Well, this Euro is a continuation of the study done in previous semesters. For this particular semester, we conducted interview of 25 Filipino domestic workers in Hong Kong. 25 valid questionnaires were collected and are at the stage of quality control and data cleaning. From the quantitative research, we get the demographic of our participants. All of them are female, and here are the distributions of their age, monthly income, and years of working as an OFW. The number 4,630 Hong Kong dollars is the basic salary of Filipino domestic workers in Hong Kong. From the qualitative interview, we found the diversification of our participants, and we got 4 takeaways. First is about the goals. Please refer to the word cloud. The top 1 goal is about children education. The second and the third are buying house and setting up small businesses. Secondly, we found that different individuals are at different stages of setting and realizing their financial goals. For example, Madeline is at planning stage, while Grace is at implementation stage. So we should design different customized solutions to help them better realize their financial goals. Fortunately, most of their families are very supportive to their goals. The fourth finding is about the COVID. Pandemic caused a flat buying in the Philippines, which trapped them in their hometowns. And if infected, they will face huge medical costs. This is a resistance to their goal realization. That's all what I'd like to share. Please let me pass to Alvis for the future aspirations. Thank you.
Yes, so in the future, we will proceed. There are 3 things that we plan to do. Firstly, we plan to clean and analyze the quantitative data to better understand the 25 participants. Unlike previous years, we plan to track them rather extensively, where we'll be conducting monthly follow-ups and be evaluating workshops that aim to move the participants closer to achieving their goals based on where they're at achieving their goals. We're thinking about using the trans-theoretical model of behavioral change to analyze where the participants are at. And in the long term, it's our hopes to construct a linked panel survey and to test interventions among Filipino domestic workers of Hong Kong. And yes, that's pretty much what we want to share with everyone here. And yeah, we open the floor for questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone. Any questions from the floor? Any questions?
Oh, do you have a question? Or,
no,
or can I go?
Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. So my question is, how many participants do you say you have?
We had 25 for this semester.
I see. So do you have a target number of total participants?
I think for this stage, because we're starting rather small, we're just trying to have a better understanding of whether or not we can track them, whether or not we can create these workshops, and whether or not these workshops actually move them closer to achieving their goals. So we're not that concerned with the small sample size at this stage. But then in the future, when we size things up, when we create a linked panel survey, when we test these interventions, then we'll
yeah, so because I was worried that if there's so much heterogeneity among people and you only have like 30 observations, right?
Yeah.
You will have no power in estimation, right? So I was just wondering if you have thought or back of the envelope calculations of like, we need like 200, 300 people minimum.
I think in the long run, when we're conducting the linked panel survey, we're thinking like in the thousands. That's the amount, the number of participants that we're thinking of. Yeah.
And may I ask, how are you going to scale it, if you have thought about it?
Right. So are you asking the intervention or?
Yeah.
Right. So in the long run, we're planning to create an app actually, which allows them to communicate with their family members and achieve consensus of what their goals are. As in the past, we've found that the communication and the relationship with the family members seems to be a big determinant of whether or not they're able to achieve their goals. And so we're thinking about that. But then with these workshops, we're trying to do the app, we're trying to do the app offline. So we're trying to help them, communicate. Maybe you go back and talk to your family members about what goals you want to achieve and come back to us, and we, that sort of thing.
Thank you.
Just to add on, these interviews really help us understand the employment history and their migration history of these domestic workers, so that when we develop the app, also another benefit would be that we can implement certain aspects of intervention. So for example, for some participants, we can require them to specify their goals, but for the others, we just let them decide how they want to word their goals. And then we can see how effective this intervention method is on this population. So that would be a very big benefit of implementing this app. So we can opt in and out of certain implementation, and we can also randomly assign these intervention and track easily the effect of it. And yeah.
Thank you.
One last question. Anybody? Any other questions? Let me ask a question then. So you guys didn't design this entire intervention survey. It's done by maybe Sujata, right? If you were in the position to design everything by yourself, what would you do? What would be the most interesting question for you for this population? Thank you.
Actually, we were involved in the making of the quantitative survey, and we did help, we read a lot of articles about financial behavior, financial choices, and sort of used that and incorporated that knowledge into suggesting some questions to Professor Vasaria and the other principal investigators, so they can sort of, take our advice or take our recommendations into consideration. But if there's some additional questions which we would like to ask from now on, I think would definitely be some more questions about the support that they get from their employers. And I think that would be more in the qualitative interview, because that's hard to sort of quantify. But we did realize one of our main observations was that a lot of their migration experience depends on the amount of support that they have from their employers in whatever form. So I think some more questions about that would be very beneficial, because that's a very big element of their ability to achieve their migration goals.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you. So why don't we pause?
One thing that
Yes,
we want to thank Professor Visaria for all her help and her guidance, and we have really learned a lot under her. So thank you so much, Professor Visaria.
All right, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so 3 presentations are over. I suggest we take a short break, 4 minutes. We come back by 4:15, and the rest of the event will help. So I will see you in 4 minutes, everyone. Thank you. All right, let's start. Sujata, please take over. Thank you.
Great. Welcome back, everyone. So our 4th presenter is Rudolph Chan. Rudolph is a student who did this research under the UROP program, supervised by Professor Amber Lee, who is also here. She is, of course, a trade economist. And we asked him to tell us a little bit about his experience, and he said that through this research he got a deeper understanding of how academic research is done, and he outlined the various steps through which he did this by following the related literature, through data cleaning, testing hypotheses, result visualization, and also frequent group meetings. His tip for other students who want to do research is to always start from the literature, because many excellent economists, he says, may have already done some of this work. And if you delve into that, you might be able to extend their ideas, and it helps you to refine the methodologies that are used. He also says, if you have questions or if you are puzzled or confused, please ask those questions to your professor. Don't be afraid, because the professor could not be happier to clarify your thoughts and might even obtain new ideas to explore through the journey. So that's from Rudolph, and you can take it away now, Rudolph.
Okay, thank you, Sujata. And good afternoon, everyone. And now here we present our work, Firms in Globalization, Evidence from China, Markups, Productivity, and Export Premium. And before we start, we would like to thank our supervisor, Amber Lee, for all the helps and guidance. And let's start from our motivation. As we could see, China's manufacturing sector experienced an impressive productivity growth over the 1990s and 2000s. And accompanied, China also expanded export actively in the 2000s, and it eventually became the largest exporter in 2009. And the expanded access to international markets and export growth are often cited as the key drivers of productivity improvement. But this comes with our question. Our question is that, conditioned on these productivity gain, does the export behavior also enable firms to charge higher markups? Here we present a literature review. First, a set of literature has examined the relation between export and productivity growth in China. So first, Liu in 2010 documents a negative premium for Chinese exporters, and Dai et al. In 2016 associate the negative export premium to the role of processing trade. And Li et al. In 2021 revisit the question using different measurements of productivity, namely physical productivity, and finds although the revenue productivity's premium is negative, there is a positive premium for physical productivity. And other papers have explored the relationship between trade liberalization and markup. So first, Dilo-Ecker et al. In 2016 find a strong negative relationship between markups and input tariffs in India. And Brendan Lauren et al. In 2017 also find a negative relation in Chinese context. And our work is mostly related to Dilo-Ecker and Wazinski's AER 2012 paper. So here I introduced some conventional way to estimate the production function. First is Oli and Peck 1996, which use investment level as a proxy. And next, the method is revised by Levinson and Petrin and Ackerberg et al. In 2015. And eventually, we used the estimation of Dilo-Ecker et al.'s Econometrica 2016 paper to estimate both revenue TFP and physical TFP, for it addressed the output price bias and input price bias. And we also recover markup as the price-cost ratio in Dilo-Ecker and Wazinski's AER 2012 paper. And here is our major findings. First, we find that controlled for productivity, exporters still show positive premium in markup than non-exporters. And second, dynamically, we find an effect that firms shift from non-exporters to exporters have positive markup premium in the medium run. And thirdly, we also explore into firm heterogeneity and find that small firms are able to charge higher markup in the medium run. So here is a roadmap for the rest of our presentation. First, we'll introduce the data and measurements. And next, we'll introduce the empirical results, which contains the export premium, the dynamic effect and firm heterogeneity, and the robustness check. And next, we'll conclude. So first, let me introduce the data. In our study, we mainly utilize 3 data sets. First is the Chinese annual production survey data set. And next is the product code classification dataset. And third is the annual survey of Chinese industrial enterprises dataset, which was compiled by the National Bureau of Statistics of China. And by matching these 2 datasets, the Chinese annual production survey dataset and the product code classification dataset, we could construct the disaggregate product layers for each firm and infer the hidden product in each layer in order to identify the single product firm. And on the other hand, the CIE dataset contains many useful firm level information, such as gross industrial output value, persons engaged, total operation input, accumulated depreciation, and sales income. In particular, we could obtain the output price for a single product firm when we combine our CIE dataset with the production survey dataset when we divide the gross output value by the production quantity. And in the end, we'll transform the corresponding nominal value into real value with the input, output, and investment deflator. Here, the next page is an example of how we identify single product firm. So in the production survey, the data structure looks like this. And here we can see that we can only identify 4 products in firm 1, but there may exist some hidden product. For example, when we compare the quantity of product A with the sum of product C and D, we may identify that there may exist some hidden product YY, and same for the same hidden product ZZ here. And if there is a product E exists in 3rd layer but not in the 2nd layer, then we can first identify there is a product DD in the
Do you hear me, everyone?
Yes.
Rudolph,
Yes.
I think Yuhan.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Connection is not good. You can
Yeah,
take over.
maybe some lagging. So what?
He's
Rudolph, you're
muted.
muted.
Sorry. So what US has mentioned is that, okay, let's go to US, could you go to previous page? Maybe that's lagging.
Oh, he can't share his screen, I think. Oh, he's back.
Okay, he's back.
Okay, sorry. Okay, let's talk about. US, could you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay.
Yes.
Can you go to the previous page? Yeah, because we cannot hear you. Yeah, in the figure 1, panel B in the figure 1. Yeah. Could you explain it once again?
Okay. So for product G here, if there is no product in the 2nd layer, then we can first identify a product DD here, and then compare the quantity of the 2 layer and to identify the product YY.
Okay, sorry for the lagging. So coming next, we'll discuss some interesting properties of the sample that we constructed before we present our empirical findings. While the single product firms remain as the overwhelming majority between 2000 and 2006, the proportion of single product firms have been growing considerably from about 70% in 2000 to just above 86% in 2006. In figure 2 on the right-hand side, we will see that in both 2000 and 2006, the policy groups are highly skewed to the right, and there is a non-tail extending as far as about 40 policy groups. And we could observe that the proportion of single product firms among the new entrants has surged from about 77% in 2001 to just above 90% in 2006, while that of single product firms among the existing firms climbed to about 86% in 2006. And it is conceivable that as the new entrants usually lack the funds and the resources, so they can only specialize in one product when they enter the market. As for the existing firms, after the years of increasing competition, they have to narrow their product scope to focus on their most profitable products, which they enjoy their competitive advantage. Now, let's look at the dynamic effect of the transformation of surviving firms into single products or the multi-product firms. In table 4, columns 3 to column 9 are computed based on the approach in the column 2, that is by comparing the year T to previous year, instead of column 1, that is by comparing year T to preceding 3-year window. As shown in this table, the proportion of firms switching from multi-products to single-product firm are consistently higher than the other way around, and this gives the verisimilitude to the hypothesis that the heated competition will drive the surviving firms to focus on their core business, although they eventually outcompeted. And here represents the reasons why we only use the single-product firm in our sample. First, from proposition 1 to 3, we show that the single-product firms are the dominance group in our sample. Second, when we use the Dinoka and our 2016 method to estimate the physical productivity, using the single product firm allow us to prevent the output price bias and the input price bias. As a result, we only use the single product firm in our empirical findings. Now we are ready to see whether there exists an export premium for the Chinese manufacturing firms. Here, mu IT refers to the markup estimate using Dinoka and Wawrinski 2012 method. EXP-IT equals to 1 if firm I exports any goods in year T. Omega IT here refers to the revenue-based productivity in column 1 in table 7, or the physical productivity, that is TFPQ, in column 2. And these both measures are estimated from the DLGKP method. LIT, KIT, and MIT refers to the labor, capital, and material used by the firm respectively. Besides, we also control for the industry and year fixed effect additively or multiplicatively. We found that regardless of controlling on the revenue-based productivity or the physical productivity, exporters could charge high premium on markups than the non-exporters. And this is consistent with the Lee 2021 paper. In particular, while the revenue-based productivity is widely used in the literature, our findings show that it might underestimate the export premium of the Chinese manufacturing firms compared with the results conditioned on their physical efficiency. And next, we'd like to see whether the manufacturing firms will charge high markup after switching from non-exporter to exporters. So now let's look at equation 2. Mu IT refers to markup estimate from the Dinoka and Wawrinski 2012 method, which is the same as before. Switch I equals to 1 if firm I has switched from non-exporter to exporter once for the sample period, and after IT equals to 1, after which the switched firm I changed their non-exporting status, and we also control for the firm and year fixed effect. Surprisingly, we found that there's no significant effect on the premium or markups, and this drives us to look at the dynamic effects of switching from non-exporter to exporter. And here, in equation 3, we interact the switch I times the after IT with a medium run term and long run term respectively. And the default scope here will be the short run group, and the short run refers to the first 2 years after the firm switched from non-exporter to exporter. Medium run refers to the 3rd and 4th year, and the long run refers to the 5th and 6th year. So in this table, in column 1, we could see that overall, the manufacturing firms switched from non-exporter to exporters could charge higher markup in the medium run than in the short run. And in column 2 and column 3, we found that high premiums on markups are capturing by switching the non-exporting status are mainly driven by the smaller firms. And here we use the employment as a proxy. Besides, we believe that the insignificant significance in the effects in the long run is due to the fact that we only use a short panel covering the period between the 2000 and 2006. And here we use a robustness check. We use the sales to cost ratio, and this ratio is directly obtained from our data instead of the estimated markup to see whether our results on the export premium will change significantly when we use different proxy for the markup. As you can see in this table, our results are still robust because the export premium condition on the physical productivity in column 2, that is the TFPQ, is still significantly larger than that condition on the revenue-based productivity, that is TFPR in column 1. And remember, in our previous findings, actually we use the employment as a proxy for the firm size. And here we use the sales income to distinguish the smaller and bigger firms. As we could see in the table 11 here, our conclusion still remains the same as we observed previously. That is, there is no significant effect when we look at the aggregate effect on the markups. And for the dynamic effects of switching the non-exporting status on markups, our results are still robust. That is, to capture the export premium on markups is mainly driven by the smaller firms, where we use the sales income as a proxy. So to conclude, we first identify the single product firm from our production survey dataset by taking the hidden products into consideration. And we explain why this is important. Because the single product firms are dominant group in our sample, and we follow the DLGKB method to estimate the physical productivity, which can prevent the input and output price bias. We found that the Chinese manufacturing firms enjoy a more significant export premium when we condition on the physical productivity compared with the revenue-based productivity. Then we show that the smaller firms, whether we use the sales income or the sales income or employment as a proxy, which switch from non-exporter to exporters, could charge out the high markup in the medium run when we compare with the short run. So in the future, we plan to include the 2007 and 2009 to our sample construction to see whether the effects become more significant in the long run. Besides, we plan to employ the severity control method and severity difference to account for the time-varying and observable confoundings. Moreover, we will also look at how firms decide to switch from non-exporter to exporter and the mechanism on channels of charging high markups. And
Rudolph,
that's the end of our presentation. Okay.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much. We have 4 minutes for the Q&A. Any questions?
So here, this photo. Oh, yeah. Yeah, you can.
Sorry, I'm just quickly asking, how do you interpret the markups? Are they, could they be including some quality differences? Like when you switch into exporters, you will sell high quality goods, or it's just a market power phenomenon? Thanks.
Here, although we have not investigated the actual channel for charging high markup, and our results show that for the smaller firms, they can charge high markup after they switch from non-exporter to exporters. And intuitively, it is because when you switch from the, when you switch from non-exporter to exporter, you need to incur some fixed costs. Usually for the big firms, they are large enough to overcome the fixed costs. So they will rather focus on their intensive margin. That is, they increase their export volume rather than extensive margin. So so here we can see our results for the effects on the market is mainly driven by the smaller firms. Although we actually in our future we will actually investigating into the exact mechanism or channels how firms, especially the smaller firms, charge high markup in the medium run. Thank you for your question.
Can I ask a question? Or is there somebody else who has a question before me?
Sujata, please go ahead. Yep.
Can you explain why do you think that the effect arises in the medium run and not in the short run?
We believe that so in the short run, when the firm switch from non-exporter to exporter, there may be some adjustment period. And actually, it is consistent with the literature of the trade liberalization. For the trade liberalization, we usually use tariff and the input or output tariff. Usually, we observe that the effect of the knowing the tariff or the trade liberalization, this effect usually captured in the medium run, because it takes time for the firms to adjust their strategy to improve the overall behavior. And we think that it is consistent with the literature, but yeah, although we in the future work, we are also investing into why especially the small firms could not charge high markup in the short run, although it shows that there's some effects in the medium run, and also the effect is significant at 10% level in the long run.
Jorge?
So the share of the single product farm is increasing. That means that there is some trend in favor of a single product farm, right? But nevertheless, you focus on the single product farmers. What kind of selection bias will you expect from this selection in the analysis? Is it hard? Okay, then there's another question. So, that you focus on single product farm, possibly because it's easier to estimate production function for single product farm, right? Is this the reason?
You could go ahead with the literature.
Yeah. So as Rudolph has explained previously, we focus on single product firm for two reasons. First is that the single product firm are dominant in our sample, and second is that we use the DLGKP method, which address the output bias and input bias based on some information that we can only get when using single product firm. For example, the bias that we have unobserved input allocation when we have multi-product firms, and this input price bias has not does not exist if we only use single product firm, since there only exists one product and all the input are concentrated to this product.
Let me add a bit here, because in the data sets we can actually define the sales output or the sales income by the quantity from our production survey data sets. So actually it only identifies the price for the single product firm instead of the multi-product firm here. So thank you for your question.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for Rudolph and UF for your presentation. Why don't we give them big hands again? Thank you. All right, let me invite our next speaker, Horace Long. Can you share your screen?
Yeah, sure.
So Horace is our student from MAEC program. He was conducting his research when he was taking his econometrics class again by Junmong, and after that he was doing Econ 4670 research projects under the supervision of Junlong Fang. Interesting thing that Horace shared with us. He said maybe doing research is 70% of frustration and 30% of reward. And when I saw this number, I was not too bad compared to the typical number that I have. He continued to say, I'm still willing to do so, willing to go for it regardless, which is the right attitude. Excellent. My advice to other UG students is that find a topic that you are really interested in and keep your passion throughout the whole process. All right, Horace, why don't you start? Thank you very much.
Okay, you guys can hear me, right? Yeah. Okay, so it's my pleasure to be here today to present my research work. So the title is named Evaluating the Value of Mass Transit Railway to Housing Premium, an Empirical Analysis of the Hong Kong Housing Market. So this will be the agenda for today. To start with, I think most of you must be very familiar of MTRL, right? So it is one of the most common public transport in Hong Kong. So according to their numbers, by the end of the 2020 December, it carries a stunning number of average 3.5 million passengers each day. So I think it appeals to most of us by, like, for example, structural networking across Hong Kong, or maybe speed or efficiency. So therefore, we highly speculate that MCHR should definitely bring the capitalization effect to the property in Hong Kong. And maybe the effect should vary, for example, during the announcement or during the opening, or maybe it varies across estates that with station with different station status. For example, those estates that does not have a station and now a station is built, or the estate that already have a station but may experience a line extension. Nevertheless, I found out that existing studies do not really explore too much on this region. So I think the most relevant study is by Sodiel in 1997, which explored the influence of transportation on Hong Kong housing price, and they deduced that property price increased by the decreasing distance to a nearest stop. So actually, we see that there is still a lot of room to explore. In the light of the above, we attempt to answer the following 3 questions. First, does MTL provide additional premium to housing price? If so, by how much? Second, does the announcement and the opening of MTL have the same effect on housing price? And thirdly, can we statistically compare the treatment effect across estates with different station status? Since I will be using Tuma line phase 1 as my observation, so allow me to provide a brief overview before I move on to the empirical analysis. So Tuma line is a rapid transit line that formed being part of the MTL system, and it connected to former MTL lines, which is the West Rail line and the Ma On Shan line. So phase 1 will extend from Tai Wai to Kai Tak section, and phase 2 will extend from Kai Tak to Hong Kong section. On the 19th July of 2019, so the Transportation and Housing Bureau announced that Tuma line will be opened on 2 separate phases, and on the 14th February of 2020, so took phase 1 open and start to operate. So during phase 1, there are 2 new stations being added, namely the Hin King station and the Kai Tak station. So following our analysis, let's group the estate near those 2 stations to be so-called new station category. And while as for the other station like Diamond Hill, Tai Wai until Wu Kai Cha station, the estate behind, let's call them existing station category. Okay. So our data consists of the housing transaction in Hong Kong from 1st of January 2014 to 29th May of 2020. So I applied the following data cleaning process to extract the things that we want. Firstly, we only keep the estates that are near to the Tuma line. By near, my definition is the Euclidean distance of the estate to a nearest Tuma line to be less than 2 kilometers. Secondly, we further divide our sample into the categories of new station and existing station as we defined just now. And finally, for each category, our criteria for choosing the control treatment group to be the treatment group within 1 kilometers of the station and 1 to 2 kilometers for the control group. So this criteria is based on the fact that in average, a person average walking speed for 1 kilometer is around like 10 to 12 minutes, right? So therefore, we believe that the station within such kilometer will definitely be capitalized into the house, into the property value. Whereas for the control group, since they are more far away from the station, so we expect that there is no effect on the estate. But more or less, since they are more closer to the treatment group, so we hope that geographic difference or like spatial effect should be eliminated and minimized, such that the only major difference to be the existence of station. Okay, so this is the summary statistics of our table. So just one thing to point out is that we can see that in both categories, the control group have a higher mean total price compared to the treatment group. So tables on the left shows our selected sample, like in a geographic distribution, and tables on the right show the monthly time trend before any treatment of the local housing price. So the blue line is the indication of time trend of control group, whereas the red line is the treatment group. So actually, we can see that they are fairly, at least very parallel in terms of their time trend. So therefore, giving us a higher confidence that at least these 2 groups are fundamentally comparable. Now, allow me to go through our methodology to tackle such problem. So first, since we have 2 categories, right? So we will run 2 different indifference regression. By the different indifference regression, we can obtain 2 following things. Firstly, we can get the ATT, the average treatment on treated of the announcement and the opening effect. Second, we can also compare the treatment effect by doing one-sided t-test to see whether which one is statistically greater than other. But we do not want to stop here. Since we are motivated that are we able to compare the effects within, across category, we will try to combine the two different regression together, such that now, since they are all in one regression, we can do another round of one-side t-test. So our first model will be a standard EID model with 2 time period, and also with including station and year, district by year by month fixed effect. So one thing the first thing that to note that is that by the construction, the DID model can give us a causal interpretation of the ATT, which beta 4 capture the announcement effects, while beta 5 capture the opening effects. Second, within each model, we can conduct a one-sided t-test stated as the null hypothesis as follows to see that whether whether the effect of one station to be greater than that of the other. The announcement opening, sorry. Yeah. Moving on to our second model, we try to combine it by attempting introducing 2 dummy variables, which such that we can compare all, put all the data into one single regression. And there are some technical derivations, so I will not prove it here, but feel free to ask me afterward. So finally, we can come into this model, the second part of the model. In this model, we can see that now actually beta 4 for the new station and for the existing station and also for the opening can be in the single regression, such that we can carry another round of t-test to see whether the effect is greater than one for or the another for the 2 station group, category, sorry. Our result is as follows. So after controlling for the housing attribute and also for our 2-way fixed effect, let's focus on the first, the column 3 first, right? So it is talking about the new station category. So we can interpret the coefficient as after the announcement, so the new station categories estate have experience of 7% increase in their housing price, and also a 10% increase in their after the opening. Whereas for the existing station category, we can see that 6% and 3% housing premium is given out after the 2 treatment period. Apart from that, we also conduct the t-test, and the result are as follows. So let's focus on the first 2 rows of our table 3. So we can see that in both cases, it is statistically significant at least from 10% level. So we can conclude that the opening effect is statistically greater than the announcement effect for new station category, whereas the announcement effect is greater than that of opening for existing station category. Secondly, we also use model 2 to compare the effects across different categories, and we see that although we cannot really conclude any evidence that there is a difference for the announcement effect for the 2, we can see that there's a very strong evidence that the opening effect for new station category is definitely, statistically greater than that of existing station. And finally, we also came to 2 robustness check procedure. By firstly, we trimmed the sample size to be after the 1st of January 19, such that the time frame for each treatment period to be more balanced. And second, we also replaced our variable of interest with log of square feet price. And again, due to time limit, I will not show the table here, but I would say the result remained very robust, and it further proved our validity of our results. Yeah. So there are a lot of discussion that we can make about our result, but allow me to only talk about one of them, and feel free to ask me if you are interested in the other. So one interesting fact that we see is that why do estate near a new station have a larger impact during the opening, whilst the effect flips for the estate with the existing station? So our guess or our hypothesis is that for the resident, they are near from the Hinking and Kaita station, so the new station category. Yeah, so they may feel actually more uncertain about when will the station be completed, because MTR have a lot of numerous construction delay before. So therefore, from their point of view, the buy-side point of view, actually they are more willing to pay when the station are actually available rather than just a simple announcement. But on the other hand, for residents that already have a new station, actually the opening of Tui Ma line does not really provide a lot of traveling convenience, because there are only 2 stations being added. So actually, we see that the announcement is more about the information signaling on on the buyer side by towing that the government have a better urban planning development on these places, and such that this is more about a signal on boosting the housing price rather than really providing convenience. And we know that maybe most of the valuation has already realized far before from the opening. So to conclude with, we use the announcement and the opening of tumor line as a treatment, and we are able to conduct a quasi experiment, and we explore the effect on housing price with MCHAO with different status. And our result shows that housing price increased by 7% and 9% for estate near the new station, and 6% and 3% for estate near our existing station. Secondly, we also observe that there's a heterogeneous effect between estate near an existing station and the new station. That is, we find out that the effect for announcement is greater than that of opening for a new station, where it is vice versa for the estate near an existing station. Finally, we introduce a method such that we can compare the coefficient of different regression. We put them together, and we are able to use this to find out that the treatment effect on estate within a new station to be greater than that of existing station. So this is the end of my presentation. I would like to take a final moment to thank you, my supervisor, Professor Feng, for his guidance. And yeah, feel free to ask me any question if you have. Thank you very much.
Any questions?
Can I ask again? Okay.
Yeah.
So for new stations, I think some residents are constructed after this plan is announced, right? For example, in Kai-Tak station, there are many residents still under construction. So when you compare the price before and after, how did you deal with this thing?
I'm sorry, can you repeat about how can I deal with it? So
for the new stations, some residents are constructed only after this plan is announced, right?
New buildings.
Yeah. So it's hard to get, we can get this price data before the treatment, right? So in such a situation, you only have after treatment prices, or at least there is some selections before and after. How did you deal with this in this research design?
Yeah, to be very honest, I think I haven't think of this question very clearly, and I'm very thankful that you provide such a direction that I'm a bit careless of. But yeah, I think the most direct way is we can actually drop those observations if there's not many to tackle such a problem and see whether the results still hold. Yeah.
I see. Then I think for the new stations, there will be more supply, right? And this will decrease the price of existing buildings than for the existing stations. So this will affect your interpretation of the estimation results.
Yeah, sure. I will take this into account. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you about it.
But is there any opposite effect? Like if new buildings are built in the same region, then the entire area is developed, and the housing price for the existing residents will go up as well. That was how I thought.
Yeah.
Like an agglomeration effect. Sorry.
Yeah, agglomeration effect. Yes.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah.
I have a question about the control group. So, I mean, I don't work in transportation economics, but when you build a new station, it's not as if the people who live between 1 and 2 kilometers away from the station are completely controlled, right? They are also benefiting because the station has not come as close, but it has come closer to them. So can you tell us a little bit about how we should interpret this treatment control difference that you're telling us about?
Yeah, sure. So actually, I would like to mention about this, but due to time limits, so I cut it. But actually, at least from my point of view, is that Hong Kong is really property dense and complex cities, and therefore actually if it is, I guess almost impossible to say that I find an estate that is completely far away from the any station. So actually, in fact, for our control group, most of them have a benefits of the other station from the other lines. For example, I'm not sure like the Guntong line or things like that. However, my thoughts and my rationale behind is that since although they still have the convenience by the other lines, but they don't have the convenience of the Tumon line, and the difference is about looking at the difference after the treatment. So I expected that the control group shouldn't change after the opening of Tuba line, since it does not affect them at all. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, so I was arguing that it does affect them also. It's just that it affected them less. It helped them less.
Yeah, I agree.
Not that it didn't help them at all, but I guess it's a matter of interpretation.
Yeah, I think it's just like pure empirical, but yeah.
Yes, I think a related point is you can simply run a ring analysis with smaller bandwidths to see how the effects just disappear. And like people might argue for existing stations, the control units are more likely to be treated because the connecting transportation is better. They're more likely to be connected to the stations by buses. Something along those lines, which explain your differences in estimators. So you might just run a ring analysis or some non-parametric approaches.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much for the advice.
So you said the opening effect is also positive. Is that right?
Yeah. Actually, both effects are
right. I mean, it makes sense to have the positive announcement effect, but backward induction simply says opening effect must be 0 to me. I mean, if you expect that the price will go up, then from the beginning, when the announcement was made, and I incorporate all the future expected, I'll just make my decision. So is your data result basically telling me that it's an investment opportunity that if I hear announcement that I need to buy the house there? Is that what you suggest?
I'm not trying to giving any investment strategy, so I'm not.
Thank you.
But actually, from my point
I have no money. Don't worry.
Yeah, at least from my point of view is that maybe there's like time lagging or like due to imperfect market information. So this may not be the case in the real world. Yeah.
Sure. Thank you very much.
Following on Yuang question, so I can't believe that there's like a change on opening. What I'm worried though is whether the parallel trends assumption still holds before the opening. So I can think about it for the announcement, but before the opening, do you observe parallel trend?
Yeah, there's definitely that I can also explore on it. Yeah, but yeah, I can still also take a look at it. Thank you for the advice.
Thank you.
All right, so thank you very much, Horace, for your presentation. Okay, thank you. So let's invite my Siri misunderstood. Sorry. Let's invite the last speaker. Please share your screen, and Sujata, please take over. Thank you.
Thank you. So the last presenter was actually just in my class in the semester that ended. This is Anthony Leung, and his paper is based on, his presentation is based on an Econ 4670 paper that he wrote on the basis of his course Econ 4334, which is money and banking. When we asked him to share something about his experience of doing the research, he said he got interested in this topic because he had read news about the Hong Kong property and mortgage market before doing the research. And also importantly, he had done an internship related to residential mortgage loans. So his tip for other students interested in doing research is to find a topic that you're interested in and that you have some basic knowledge about, either from work, study, or from daily observation, and that you feel comfortable dealing with. And he says his internship experience helped him a lot when he was doing this research. So Anthony, you can start anytime now.
Yes, thank you, Professor Visari. And my topic is about the stability of residential mortgage loan repayment in Hong Kong. And big thanks to Professor David Cook for guiding my research and providing advice of my research. And here is my content about what I'm going to talk about. First, there's some background of why I'm interested in and why this topic would be important for me. And also the second part is I will explain some factors affecting the residential mortgage loan default behavior, and there would be after that would be some recommendations on how to improve the residential mortgage loan repayment stability, and finally is the conclusion. before my presentation, I would admit that there would not be as much empirical analysis as the before presentations, because my major purpose of this paper is to looking for some insights from other scholars, which maybe their opinions may somehow the same or different with the market opinions, and this is what my research paper aims on. Yeah, and here is some background about the residential mortgage loan repayment. Why is this topic important? Is because residential mortgage loan consists of a substantial proportion of total loans and advances. Since the end of the the start of the 21st century, it is around 20% of the total loans and advances in Hong Kong, and it is a rather stable proportions in Hong Kong. And residential mortgage loan is important for the banking industry as well as the individuals, because if people cannot repay their residential mortgage loans, they will subject to foreclosure cases, which the individual's property would be sold with deep discount. This is not only the loss of the individual, but also the loss of the banks. Yeah, and here are some factors affecting our residential mortgage loan default behaviors. The first one, which is a lot of research have been have some insights on. It is about the relationship between the property price and the default rate. Some scholars have described the equity and ability to pay theory of default, which means that if a person default, some reasons would be because they do not have the property was subject to negative equity, or because they have insufficient income to pay for their mortgage. And then what factors will affect the property price? The first one is the macroeconomy, because under some extreme economic crisis like global financial crisis and COVID pandemic, there might be some hit for the housing prices of the residential properties. However, in the experience in Hong Kong, this drop of the property price would not be so large, and other factors like asset prices and interest rates may be dominated. Therefore, actually, the macro economy in Hong Kong since 2003 did not bring very much effect to the repayment behavior of the residents. About the asset price, some scholars have found that there would be some negative correlation between the some stock prices like Hang Seng Index and the property price, but also some scholars would suggest that the correlation of these two assets would be decreasing in the past decade, probably because of other factors like the land supply in Hong Kong is not sufficient, and then the interest rate factor would be because there was a quantitative easing in the United States since 2008. And the interest rate was low since then, and because of the link exchange rate between the Hong Kong and US, the required return for the flats in Hong Kong decreased a lot, and therefore people would with the same rent, people would can afford higher prices for their flats. Yeah, and the land supply, which I have briefly mentioned before, is that since the early 2000s, the government has cut the land supply and the sale of subsidized flats, and it was relaunched in the 2010s, which the land supply is still insufficient. But then during these years, the government would suggest to increase largely on the land supplies, probably because of the development of the new towns like Kutong and other places in the northern New Territories. Another special point to mention is the special stamp duty, because the government has imposed a large proportion of tax on non-local residents which own and which they have owned more than one residential property or resell the flat within 3 years. And some scholars would suggest that it was not an effective tool to control the property price, despite its immediate negative effect. In the long run, the property price still increased because of the lack of land supplies. And there are also some scholars mentioned that the low interest rate also matters. Yeah. Okay, the second point that affect the residential mortgage loan repayment is the macroprudential measures for mortgages. There are two main policy areas from the Hong Kong Monetary Authority. The first is the loan-to-value ratio cap. In Hong Kong, the LTV ratio is capped at 50 to 60%. And people need to pay a substantial down payment, like around 40 to 50% for the flat, without other measures like some the mortgage insurance. This is to prevent the credit boom, which happens in the late 1990s in Hong Kong. A report from HKMA shows that it can this policy can improve the bank resilience against drop in property prices. And there are also some scholars also suggest that this can reduce the non-performing loans ratio. But the policy in Hong Kong is different with US, because US control the LTV with the interest rate, but Hong Kong cannot do so because Hong Kong has the linked exchange rate in with United States, and Hong Kong cannot control its interest rate by its own. And the second policy is the debt servicing ratio, which the purpose is similar to the LTV ratio. It is to control the individual's borrowing and repayment amount, and their monthly repayment should not be more than a substantial proportion of their monthly income. And as the graph shows, that the overall debt service ratio in Hong Kong is increasing over time, because Hong Kong people afford more and more expensive property prices, and they need to they need to borrow a larger and larger debt for their mortgages. So the debt servicing ratio is increasingly binding over time. Yeah, and the third point is the mortgage insurance program. It is a program that people can borrow up to 90% of their property value, and they need to pay the insurance fee for the exceeding LTV portion. Because like if they can borrow 90% of the property value, they will need to pay the insurance fee for around 30% of their total amount of the property. And if the mortgage goes non-performing, the HKMC, which provides the mortgage insurance, it will compensate banks for that exceeding portion if the person cannot repay the loan. And some scholars found that the risk of default may increase if the LTV ratio of MIP loans exceed 90% and 70 and 80% for uninsured mortgage. And luckily, in the case of Hong Kong, though all of these ratios have not been exceeded, because Hong Kong has a very strict limit on these ratios. And also some scholars would found that the HKMC is prudent in approving the MIP applications, and also the banks are also good at controlling the credit risk for individual loans. For example, if the bank think that an individual is not very stable in their job, or they have some risk of not repaying their loans, they can adjust accordingly for their terms in the mortgages, for example, with increasing interest rate for repayment. And as we can see, after the relaxation of MIP, the amount approved by HKMC for the mortgage insurance expand a lot. And maybe also even more today because of the renewed mortgage plan by the financial secretary recently. Yeah, and also for the interest rate fluctuations in Hong Kong, usually people would use HIBOR as the reference rate because they think that the HIBOR rate is lower than other reference rates. For example, nowadays people can borrow with HIBOR loans with lower than 2% interest rate for their residential mortgage loans. And the bank would treat HIBOR as the natural hedging against the interest rate risk because they are floating interest rates. And but at the same time, the risk of the borrowers of the interest rate risk will increase because, like recently, the U.S. Federal Reserve has increased the federal rate, and then there may be fluctuations in the HIBOR in the near future. And some scholars worry that the Hong Kong property may be overvalued because the interest rate is near zero bound for many years, and the property price increase over time since the interest rate is very low. However, for the interest rate, there would be something that the borrowers may be safer because HIBOR loans is usually with a prime cap, which means the HIBOR rates would not exceed the cap with reference to prime rates, and then the prime rate is usually more stable than the HIBOR rate. Okay, and as recently there is a COVID pandemic, and some scholars also review the effects of the pandemic to the residential property prices and also the repayment of the loans. And because the unemployment rate would be impacted, according to the sector, for example, like aviation and tourism, they will suffer more. And usually workers in these industries may not be repaid loan as stable as other industry, and the default ratio may rise for those borrowers. And also there was some support from the government. For example, the principal moratoriums. The individuals who cannot repay the loans can be defer the loan repayment. So the scholar worry that the situation may be worsened if these measures cannot sustain. And also for different kinds of properties, residential properties tends to stay more firm with their prices because of the trend of the home office. And the demand for relative demand for office may be lower than the residential properties because people would more likely to stay at home to work and live. However, in general, the COVID pandemic didn't affect very much about the repayment rate because, since October 2009, the 3-month delinquency ratio according to HKMA was really low compared to the end of the 1990s. Okay, so here are some recommendations. The first one is promoting fixed rate mortgage. As I've said before in the interest rate part, because some borrowers tend to choose the lowest interest rate according to the scholars, and it can be proved by
Anthony, do you hear
time
me?
is up already.
Can you wrap up quickly because time is up? So I give you 1 more minute to wrap up. Thank you.
There are 3 recommendations. The first one is promoting fixed rate mortgage, and the second is controlling the tenor of mortgages because the tenor in Hong Kong is really long because of the very high residential prices, and also introducing the new models for mortgage payments because in general people income would be different according to their ages. Like they would be increased after their graduation and decrease like a little bit before the before retirement. So the bank may adjust the mortgage payment with their ages so that people would be more likely to pay their mortgage repayment more stably. Yeah. So that's all of my presentation. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Anthony. Any questions? We have 4 minutes for the discussions.
So are these recommendations already discussed in the government and or in some association or something?
I beg your pardon?
So you make some recommendations, right?
Yeah.
So are these recommendations already discussed in the governments?
I think that some of that may not have been discussed in government. For example, the new models for residential mortgage payments, because nowadays I think that all of the residential mortgages are paid in fixed amount, and I think that there is no. I haven't seen anybody else in Hong Kong would suggest that the residential mortgage payment can change over time, like maybe less in the first few years of when the people are younger, because when people are younger they tend to earn less, and when they they are older, they earn more, so that the mortgage loan repayment can adjust. And also the fixed rate it is also not very popular in Hong Kong, because HKMC has offered fixed rate mortgage plans, but actually not many people has take it, but the HIBOR plan instead.
Then why do you think banks do not adopt these kind of a loan scheme?
I think that maybe because the market is I think that it is similar as the point as the scholar mentioned, that borrowers tend to choose the lowest rate, for the fixed rate mortgage point, for example, because people tend to be short-sighted when they are they see which mortgage is cheaper, they will just borrow it. But I think that there should be more education in Hong Kong about the financial knowledge, maybe what is about the interest rate or other things else, so that people can know about what is the interest rate risk and how to deal with them. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Have you checked any other countries' mortgage policy and get any empirical evidence regarding one of any suggestions you made? Like I know Hong Kong situation is special, but is there any way to compare the case of Singapore, for example?
Yeah, maybe I think that maybe this point is one of my one of the point that I may need to do more, because the empirical analysis I didn't involve very much in this project. So maybe if I have other opportunities to have further research, I may compare more about compare with other economies for the related figures.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions? One last. All right, it seems we have no more questions. Thank you very much, Anthony.
Thank you very much.
All right, so all 6 presentations are over. So here's what we're gonna do. So we're gonna put all the presenters and students to the breakout rooms, and in the main room, only the faculty members will stay. All right, everyone, thank you very much for coming back. First of all, thanks all the presenting groups and individuals for your excellent presentations. And all the faculty members who participate in the event today, as well as those supervisors who spend time and effort to help our students to really enjoy the process of the research. Now the voting is over, and then we have the 2 winners at hand. And let me announce first the first runner-up. The first runner-up is the first presenters, Chan, Cheuk, Rudolph, and Yuhan. Congratulations. Thank you very much. Congratulations. All right, well done, well done. So this is the certificate, and then we're gonna prepare the copy, and then you can always sometimes visit the Econ office, pick it up, okay, whenever you have time. Thank you very much. Well done. Now, let me announce the winner of this UG Research Showcase. The winner is, should I announce it now or?
Drum beat. Dun, 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 dun. Go.
All right, so the winner is Horace Leung. Congratulations. Horace.
Oh, seems there is some technique for his screen.
The screen has frozen from excitement.
Oh yeah.
I'm sorry about that. Every time, like when there's a switch on my computer, like the Zoom lag. I'm sorry about that. And yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, Horace, well done. Congratulations. You are the winner of this year's event. Okay, thank you very much. We also have 4 presenters. Even though they didn't really win anything today, it doesn't mean that their presentation was not good enough. It was very, very good, impressive performance. And I hope that all of you really enjoy the process of doing your research, identifying interesting questions, having some challenges, overcome those challenges together with your supervisors. And this is exactly what all the researchers are doing. All right. So let me invite the director of the Center for the Economic Policy, Professor Sujata Visaria, for her concluding remarks. Sujata?
Thank you. I really don't have much to add. I think Yeung has already said much of what I wanted to say as well, which is that research is difficult. I think all of you that have presented here have realized that through the various efforts that you made. Yet, as somebody said, even if it's 70% frustration, the 30% reward seems to make it worthwhile for most of us. So I hope all of you also felt that it was worthwhile. I think all the presentations were excellent. It's unfortunate that we can only have 2 winners, but I think you should all consider yourself winners because of the tremendous effort that you made. And I think all the presentations were excellent. So thank you very much. I think the work that you have done in the presentations will be an inspiration to other students who are thinking about perhaps doing their own research projects in the future. So that is the tremendous contribution that you've made to future generations of students, to our department, and also to the Center for Economic Policy. The Center for Economic Policy does not only consist of economists. There are other research affiliates as well, and we hope that in future events, some of the students from other disciplines will also participate. Thank you so much, and thank you for staying for so long. And thank you to Yeung, to Kathy, Millie, and Hiram for all the hard work. Especially Yeung has really taken the lead on this one. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. I hope to see you all next year for the same event.